Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to Fine Print. This is the weekly show where we take a look at a poem that you've written, published, and just kind of see what's making it function, what makes it work. We dig into things like the speaker, the motivations, the stakes, structurally, the turns, the stanzas, the line lengths, and the enjambment, all those things coming together in the piece so that way we can see what is actually happening to guide you in this process. Hello, guys. My name is Jeff. This is all part of Diverses, our goal, professional poetry development, trying to help you grow not only creatively, but also professionally, financially, find ways to sustain yourself. Let's take a look at our piece here. And I do want to just give a quick shout out and thank you to Sculpted Roses. Joshua, thank you for allowing us to make this piece. You sent us this piece a minute ago, so it's good that we finally get a chance to check it out as we enter the new year. This poem is titled The Afterthought. Why do we always become aware of things when it's too late? The unconscious mind screaming, the closed ears. Just wait. In hindsight's 2020, but some are looking the wrong way, people gasping for one last breath when fate is instinctive. And we just opened the wrong gate, stumbling down a dark road, drunk off your indecisive thought and getting lost in a maybe going anywhere but up, sipping from the finest glass, when all we need is a cup. Your no cannot see clearly, and your yes comes about rarely. So you always leave a PS explaining all your wishful maybes. So this is just a postscript explaining my life in a long PS because we all have regrets or stuff we wished we would have said. We're constantly writing little nothings in life that mean everything in someone's head. This is my afterthought. P.S. A heart beating but dead. Thank you again to Sculpted Roses, the time postscript, for submitting this piece. And the thing I kind of want to discuss today is I want to discuss more on form. So this is a form that is playing around with conventions related to letter writing. And I think that when you're thinking of your poem, when you're thinking about your piece, and especially, it's hard to do this in the first draft, but once you're in later drafts, you can really kind of start thinking about, what is your poem doing? What are the things that it's really kind of focusing on? And then how can we then amplify it as much as possible? So this is a poem that, again, is playing around with things that are related to letter writing, which means how can we find some ways to tie in aspects of letter writing in this? And there are already some, we're especially with regards to things that are related to even just the poet's former artist name, but things related to like PSs and things like that. So as I'm reading this, I'm kind of wondering, man, are there other ways that we can kind of tie in almost like a letter format to this just to kind of unify aspects of the poem? Just to Can we give it like a letter feel and then kind of twist it around or things like that, or an email feel or a text message feel, something that kind of plays with the form more, including maybe even with the title. The title kind of suggests it with the word afterthought, but I'm wondering if we could maybe even expand it further. It seems that the PSs are the element that really I think come across most clearly. They appear in several places, so I just kind of want to highlight those. You always leave a PS here. So this is just a postscript in a long PS, and then there is the PS. I'm wondering if how do they, typically with PSs, if you keep adding them, like it's PS, PPS, PPPS. There's a lot of different play that could have been involved with that. Plays, for instance, maybe in terms of like introductions, plays also with conclusions and things that I think may have been helpful. Even adding things, for instance, like addresses, uh, any sort of delivery that you think would help this feel like a letter I think would have been interesting to kind of tie in. So I do think we have some opportunities here, even just like structurally. So when I'm looking at this poem, I'm not really seeing necessarily a letter. So that's another thing that you could consider. Like, hey, a lot of letters typically you're looking at paragraphs, you're looking at margin to margin, things like that. So what are some ways that visually, when someone's looking at this piece, how can I immediately think, oh, a letter? I immediately see letter. Anything at all. Um, Even thinking about the stamps and things like that. So I think like form wise, there's a lot of opportunity here that could be tapped into. If this is still a piece um, that's working on or that's being worked on. But let's kind of go line by line and kind of see what's happening in the piece. I'm going to approach it as, let's imagine that again we're just going right from the title into the poem itself, and just kind of seeing what hits us immediately. And if there's things that you notice as I go through this analysis, I certainly let us know in the chat, or if you're watching this on the replay, in the comments. So the afterthought. So that's our title. I feel like afterthought is a word that often has a negative connotation. When you think afterthought, you're thinking, oh, like I was forgotten, I was left behind, I was only considered late and things like that. So I think a lot of times it has a very negative connotation. I think that can be helpful, with titles having words that carry some emotional weight to them, even like emotional baggage, because that sets a frame for the piece. So I kind of appreciate that. I see James is here. Hello, James. Always good to see you, good sir. Hope you're doing well tonight. Let's go on to the first line here. Why do we always become aware of things when it's too late? Why do we always become aware of things when it's too late? James saying today, agree with the previous assessment I gave. It's always interesting with we's. A lot of times we's are really just replacements for I. So the speaker kind of conveying it. Okay. Yes, James, we're doing good. And if you're watching with us, know a couple other people, feel free to say hey. If you're liking what we're doing so far, you can help me out by liking the stream. Why do we always become aware of things when it's too late? I literally just made a short and a reel talking about one point. This first line, in a lot of ways, I'm nervous that it's a summary for the poem. So the poem's going to be about a realization that comes too late. I'm really kind of nervous about it. Be careful with titles. We don't want. I mean, be careful with titles. Be careful with first lines. We don't want the first line necessarily to reveal the entire poem. And I'm not saying that it is. We'll read through the poem and kind of see what happens. But that's one thing I'm mildly concerned about. Also, because this is in some ways kind of taking us out. We're never even entering the poem. We're just kind of put into a synopsis of sorts, but we're not being made aware what's the situation that's actually leading us to the conclusion. Okay, so in some ways we kind of are stalling the momentum. We're not really allowing progression to happen into the piece. Always become aware of things when it's too late. Things is a little bit generic. This is an opportunity. You have a real opportunity here to kind of dive into that. Okay. See, Joshua's here. Joshua, cool. Joshua, as I go through this, if you have specific questions I can help with for this piece, be sure to let me know. I'm not intending this as a workshop. So I'm really just trying to let you know, as I approach this from a first read, what are the things that kind of jump to mind for that. And also Bella's here too. Everyone's in the house. Look at everyone in the house. Sunday evenings are for poetry. What can we say? Okay. So this is interactive, guys. So as things happen and you get your own thoughts, be sure to let me know. Okay. Why always become aware of things when it's too late? The unconscious mind screaming to closed ears. Just wait. The unconscious mind screaming to closed ears. Something I'm mildly confused about there. So the mind, the unconscious mind, is this James? James gets a clap too. James will also, we will also get James a James is fancy, so he'll get that. I apologize, sir. Um, this line here: the unconscious mind screaming to closed ears. Just wait. Whose mind are the mind in the ears belonging to the same person? Because that's how I'm initially reading that. And if that is true, I don't. I get it, but I don't get it. Because when your mind is talking to yourself, you literally don't hear it. There's no sound. At least not for me. Like when I think thoughts, I don't like talk out loud. Like there is no like audible sound that I'm aware of. About to ask my wife, but there's no audible sound. So that the closed ears parts, like I get it, but I kind of don't get it. I don't know. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on that. The conscious mind screaming to close ears. Just wait. Also, because why do we become aware of things when it's too late? So we're also saying that the unconscious is aware of the things, but we're not listening to what our unconscious is trying to tell us. So we are, in a sense, aware, but we're not allowing ourselves to become aware. So we're kind of complicit in our own lack of awareness, maybe. Am I going too far? Am I reading too much into it? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Like I'm mildly confused by that opening. Granted, it could also just be because it's late here on a Sunday. Um, but again, so the poem, I'm still not entirely aware of what's the situation that we're even talking about. It's interesting saying, why do we always become aware of things? So this is a repeated occurrence. This is the speaker trying to establish a connection with other people. And why do we always become aware? So this is something, an ongoing sort of source of frustration. This is a speaker who's frustrated because, man, I always realize things too late. Why does this keep happening? Even though deep down I actually am aware of it, but I'm just not allowing myself to be aware of it. Why is this happening to me? So as of this moment in the first couplet, that's seems to be the big tension right now. Although with the we, now I'm also wondering, what's the relationship aspect. It could just be, again, a we representing everybody, or it could be a we speaker versus speaker and a person they're in a relationship with. Okay, Rose is saying, I'm understanding what they wanted to convey. Okay, so we're on the right track. So we'll keep rolling. Okay. Hindsight's 2020, and some are looking the wrong way. So we have a lot of these characters. So we have the we up here, we have the unconscious mind, and now we have some. And then we have people. And then we have the we again. We're getting complicated in terms of people and characters in a very small space. And we haven't really defined anybody. We haven't even defined the speaker, in all honesty, in a lot of ways. How does this change? And I'm not saying do this. This is just kind of a question I asked. How does this change if it's just like why do I always become aware of things when it's too late? My unconscious mind screaming to my closed ears. In hindsight, it's 2020, but I'm always looking the wrong way. I'm gasping for one last breath when fate is instinctive and I just opened the wrong gate. You know what I mean? So how does this change, depending on the speaker? And if it is the I throughout this, what is it that we're avoiding by kind of communalizing it? I don't even know if that's a word. Like how if we start kind of associating this with everybody as opposed to just kind of focusing on our own specific experience. That's just kind of a question I have. Why are we involving these other people who aren't actually defined as opposed to just approaching it from our own perspective? When fate, there's also some stakes involved here, right? Hindsight's 2020, but some are looking the wrong way. I guess even afterwards. So some are looking the wrong way even in hindsight. So people have the ability, after something has happened to look the right way, but they're still looking the wrong way. Why? Is it intentional? Why is this happening? Hindsight's 2020, but some are looking the right way. People gasping for one last breath. Gasping. So we're seeing difficulty. We're seeing struggle. James says that I really see where this is going and I like it. Tell me what you see, James. Put it into words. Guide me on what you are getting from this. But some are looking the wrong way. People gasping for one last breath. So there's a sense of desperation and struggle. And it's almost seeming this battle like life death. There's a lot at stake here, it feels. Um, why, I'm not sure. When fate is instinctive and we just opened the wrong gate. It's interesting pairing. So we have fate, but then wrong gate. Okay. So fate, it's interesting because fate would imply that fate implies that we're ending up somewhere to where we don't really have a choice and we would get to regardless. And then we just opened the wrong gate. Wrong gate in terms of what we want or wrong gate in terms of fate? Because if it's the wrong gate in terms of fate, well, then in some ways I feel that that's almost contradictory because fate, there is no real wrong gate. If we end up where we need it. No? Am I am I going too far here? Let's see what James says. So most people are an afterthought. That's what James says. And intention is an afterthought with them. Okay. I think that hits on something that we've kind of been saying in the sense of that kind of awareness. But the thing that I don't attention is an afterthought with them. I guess the one thing when I think of afterthought, a lot of times I think lack of agency, lack of control. And I don't know how much people lack control versus are intentionally choosing to miss things. I guess that's the thing I'm kind of curious about is how complicit are we in this aspect of um, the afterthought and the hindsight? Because there seems to be some level of intentionality here. It seems like sometimes people are intentionally looking the wrong way, or sometimes intentionally not listening to their mind, especially that sense of like closed ears, you know? Um, and James says, this could just be me, though, but I see the PS as, oh, by the way, here's what I really meant to say. And then the entire letter is really just a cover for the PS is about to come. Okay. Also, want to just mention, it's a point that Rose has mentioned. For some reason, I like to approach my writing from first person as well as an all-inclusive perspective. I was at a workshop with a poet named Vivi Francis, and one of the things that I learned from her, among many things, she's great to work with if you ever get the chance, is she says, the individual is universal. So sometimes by writing to include everyone, we actually end up including no one. So the fact that you can actually use your own individual experience and still be able to create something that everyone can really resonate with. So, a lot of times using words like we or you and things like that in place of an I actually end up causing more isolation than if you would actually just use an I or a first person perspective from the start. So just kind of something to consider. Um, I is still powerful. Um, Rose says, I'm still on the right track. Okay. Still on the right track. So I'll keep rolling. Okay. Um, hindsight is 2020, but some are looking the wrong way. People gasping like when fate is instinctive and we just opened the wrong gate. So the thing, I guess, the big thing that I'm just not sure of to this point is intentionality. Is this opening the wrong gate? Is this looking the wrong way? Is this closed ears? Is all of this intentional? Or is this something that we don't have control over? So I just don't know. How intentional is this? Because that changes everything. If I'm, just being stubborn and feigning ignorance, or maybe even intentionally allowing myself to be ignorant, that's a very different approach, right? Than if I am genuinely ignorant of something. So the level of control here, I'm not entirely sure about. Okay, that's an A, but it looks really hard to see. Stumbling down a dark road. Drunk off your. So now we have a your. Is this the first your? This is the first time. Stumbling down a dark road. Okay, so we have this sense of being lost, not knowing where we are, unfamiliarity. We see that with the word stumbling. We see this with dark. But we also, at the same time, there's this sense of there is a path, right? Because there is a road. So I don't know where I'm going, but there is a direction here. It's not like I'm just going off track. Drunk off your indecisive thought. Sipping. Grammatically, this line is a little bit tricky because I don't know who's drunk. Is it the you? Potentially, it could be the speaker as well. Because just a note, the grammar here isn't entirely clear. Okay, I'm going to assume that it's the you. Okay. But again, also because we haven't had a you anywhere else until now. That's another potential issue. Drunk off your indecisive thought. So we have indecision and getting lost, and it may be going anywhere but up. I'm kind of wondering, you've already, I feel like I'm already there. When you say stumbling down a dark road, and then we have the getting lost, I feel like I'm already there. I don't know how much that's helping me. And then maybe going anywhere but up. Okay. I also don't know, what are we being indecisive about? I think that's another thing too, is I don't know what all of this. I still don't know what the wrong gate is. I don't know what is the thing that I became aware of too late. I don't know what was the hindsight. It feels a lot like we're kind of like writing around the thing instead of just saying the thing, if that makes sense. We're being very cryptic. Sipping from the finest glass when all we need is a cup. Okay. So sipping from the finest glass. So we're lost. We're indecisive. We're kind of meandering, maybe. But at the same time, and this goes back to the earlier point too. It goes back to this intentionality. We're all of these things, and yet there is a degree of this being. I'm willingly putting myself in this position. I'm sipping from the finest glass when all we need is a cup. Do we? Again, the pronoun. So it's like drunk off your. Could the your also be our? Or could it also be my? um, Sipping from the finest glass when all we need is a cup. Okay. Because it also feels like the speaker is also doing the sipping as well. It feels like when all we need is a cup. Because it appears that the sipping also applies to the we, right? Um,
Okay, so I want to just do a quick recap because there's a lot happening here. So we open with kind of just a sense of, ah, man, I wish I could have seen these things sooner. Even though, oh, maybe actually, if I had paid attention to my unconscious self, maybe I could have seen this sooner. Um, and then thinking about, well, now that I see the results, I could have made a better decision. But the reality is, no, I'm actually still making bad decisions or still looking the wrong way. Um, and I'm just doing it because that feels like how I should, based on, fate's instinctive. And now I still have to deal with these repercussions of my actions. Okay. Um, and now I'm lost. I'm indecisive, and yet I'm still looking for the wrong things. Right. I'm sipping from the finest glass, even though that's not necessary. Something basic would have been perfectly fine. That's where I'm at so far. Bella, if you're still here, James, if you're still here, let me know if am I, are we all together or are we all kind of on our own different roads here? Um, your no cannot see clearly and your yes comes about rarely. This is an interesting line. When I was first reading through this poem, it reads almost like a typo, and then it takes you a moment and you're like, oh, I see it. Which I like. I like those sort of lines that cause you to do a second reading. That the first time reading, you're like, wait, what? Okay. Joshua was saying I'm on the nose so far. All right. The sound dog will keep going. Your no cannot see clear, and your eyes and your yes comes about rarely. So there's a problem. The no can't see clearly, and so you can't really trust the no's because they don't really. When you say no, you don't entirely know what you're saying no to. And then yes, but you're also not saying yes to things very often. And so instead, we are left, you always leave a PS explaining all your wishful maybes. So it's kind of like we're keeping our head in the clouds. Um, but we're not necessarily being realistic or grounded. Okay. So none of the answers that they give us are really satisfying in any way for the your. That's kind of what I get from that. So you always leave a PS explaining all your wishful maybe. So this also, what are the implications of this stanzas, this couplet? There's communication going on. This is this stanza, interestingly, probably shows the greatest direct connection between the you and the speaker, if they are two different characters. And also, interestingly enough, this is another couplet. We had a couplet in the opening, but then this couplet, in a lot of ways, to me right now, feels a lot more meaningful, just because if the you and the speaker are two different, okay, because it feels like to me that the you is leaving these correspondences, these PSs and things like that for the speaker. And another reason why I think that is because the next line brings in this my. Is this the first my? Is this the first time the speaker actually becomes a real independent single being? So this is where the poem kind of, for me, starts grounding itself out in terms of its characterization. Because the you starts feeling like a separate person, and then the speaker starts to get their own identity clearly for the first time. All right, and this confirms it. Roses mentions yes, two different people. Um, I see James saying country roads, city roads don't always merge perfectly, but they do get you where you need to go eventually. Okay, and again, I think that kind of highlights like the lack of control and the following of fate and things like that mentioned earlier. Okay, so this is just a postscript explaining my life in a long PS. See, okay, so that previous couplet introduced this idea that the you and the speaker they have these correspondences. The you leaves a lot of PSs, and then the speaker is now also getting involved in that, leaving their own as well. Okay. So this is just a postscript explaining my life in a long PS. Because we all, and now we're going back to universal, right? We all have regrets or stuff we wish we would have said. Okay. We're still staying cryptic. We are still not going to be told what these regrets are. We're still not going to be explained what we wish we would have said. Even though ironically we're writing a letter. We're writing a letter to express ourselves, but we're expressing that I'm not going to express everything. That's basically what's happening in this letter. We're really keeping a lot of things hidden, which ironically is kind of suggested also by the next line. We're constantly writing little nothings in life that mean everything in someone's head. Well, that kind of summarizes what's kind of been the experience for this. Like, there are a lot of these little situations and things that are obviously very meaningful, for instance, to the speaker. But I think that kind of highlights one thing for the poem is that I'm from a reader's perspective, I'm never really being allowed to enter. Everything's staying at this very abstract high level. There's suggestions of history, there's like, oh, these things happen when they're too late. Oh, why am I aware of it now? I wish I knew then. There's these references to hindsight. There are these references to um these past experiences where this person would say no or they would say yes, or there's so many maybes, um but we're never actually told what they are. This is my afterthought. I like the single line for that. And I think that this goes back earlier to um the idea of the letter. Something I mentioned earlier in the very beginning of this is like, so if this is a poem that's kind of taking on suggestions of letters and things like that. So my again, this isn't intended as a workshop, but something that I would really kind of consider for this is how can I make this more lettery? How can I really make this feel like a letter? Maybe even signing off like this is my afterthought. And then maybe like putting postscript, like a dash then postscript. So like this is like your close for the letter, right? And then PS, a heart beating, but dead, which also happens to be in many ways kind of our first concrete image. I mean, there was the image earlier of the dark road, but this is one. I think it's an interesting image. Um, you have the irony, the heart beating, even though it's dead. Okay. Um, James mentioning too, I was thinking that too, make it look like a letter. I think there's a lot we could play with in terms of form. Oh, I think like the XO, yeah, like an XOXO. This is my afterthought. Yeah, instead of maybe write postscript, you could have write XOXO or something like that. Yeah. Um, and I think the XO that would also I don't know the relationship between the you and the speaker. I'm imagining romantic, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But if you did that, but if this is something romantic and you want that to be slightly clearer, I think XOXO could kind of help seal that a little bit more firmly for your reader. Um, Heart beating, but that it's a very heavy period at the end there. Um, so something that if I were looking at this piece, like especially on paper or like with a group and things like that, I think one thing I would really be wondering is what are we talking around? There's something that inspired this piece. There's something that caused the afterthought. That's a very interesting thing too. The afterthought, something I kind of missed, but this almost makes the person that I'm imagining the speaker into the afterthought. I'm no longer a person. I'm an afterthought. You know, um, so that sort of sense, like I feel like I'm just not being given enough things to put all the pieces together. I mean, I kind of can, but only to an extent. Um, Whereas, if there were a specific thing that happened in the relationship, like a specific fight over something, or um, an invitation that never arrived, or something like that, that changes the whole context. Some backstory bars is backstory purpose of confusion poems from my first publication. This poem is from the second chapter, where all the poems speak from this voice trying to find itself. Okay. And then James brings up the idea. So in a way, this is a PS to speaker. More things here. Rosa says, find yourself in relationships, learn to grow, be yourself, and learn about yourself, faults, responsibilities, and so on. Those are all a lot of things. I'm guessing you're talking about the collection as a whole, not just for this piece. If all those things are just for this piece, that's a lot to kind of squeeze into a poem that's, again, not particularly long either. So I'd really kind of be asking myself, what is the, and again, if I'm overstepping, please, please, please stop me, because I did not intend for this to become a workshop. That's not my goal. The goal is to be kind of just more analysis. That being said, um, something I would really be kind of asking myself is, what is the one central tension in this piece? With the idea of the concept of the afterthought, that seems to be the thing that I would be honing in on. What caused the speaker to feel like an afterthought? What was the specific thing that occurred for that to happen? And what's the change that occurs because of that? And Rosa mentions, yes, it's referring to collection as a whole for all those topics. Yeah. Um, yeah, totally get that. I think that right now, based on everything you're kind of saying, it almost feels like maybe this is a poem that was written, for almost like for yourself to kind of like, put, like, navigate some things. I think if we're taking this to the next level for like a reader level, I think at some point, and maybe not necessarily for this piece, but at some point we have to be willing to let our reader more into what's going on. Because again, it does still feel like to me that I'm only allowed to enter to a certain extent before I'm kind of being, forced to back off. Um, I would also consider all these perspectives, all these characters, in a lot of ways, get mildly confusing. Even cutting it down, if this is between a speaker and another character in particular, just focusing on those two characters may be enough. Again, like I mentioned earlier, just talking about that, even if other people don't have the exact same relationship dynamics, they'll still be able to put themselves into the position of the speaker. So it's still going to be universal to a degree. Okay, you're not going to lose that just because the poem goes from like we's and all of us and things like that down to two. Um, it's just something to consider. And maybe that's not the poem's job. Again, Joshua's saying here was written more for myself, and I agree with your point. Um, so kind of making a decision if you want it, if you want this to not just be for yourself but also to be for others. Those are some things that I would be considering. Okay. Um, all right. I'm going to pause us here. I want to give a quick shout out again to Joshua. Thank you so much for allowing us to read through your poem. Thank you also to Bella and to James for stopping by and sharing your thoughts, especially James. Really appreciate you. Always good to see you both. We will be back on Tuesday, right? Actually, around this time, as always, with the Versus Live. I'm talking about, again, more topics related to poetry. If there's a topic that you would find to be particularly helpful in a future stream, be sure to let us know. Otherwise, we hope you guys have a good week. Thanks for being with us. Once more, this has been the Versus Fine Print. If you have a poem that you would like us to take a look at in the future, especially like if it's a published poem, but if it's also just one you'd like us to kind of read through, analyze a little bit, see what's going on structurally, things like that, that's perfectly fine as well. Send it to us or send us a link. And I'll see you all later. Thanks to James for the kind words. Thanks again to Joshua. Always good to see you both. Hope you guys take care. Have a good day. Have a good night. Good afternoon. Once more, you watched on the Versus Fine Print. Thank you guys. You take care.